What's up, guys? Your boy El checking. You already know where we at. We back out here in Rio de Janeiro. So today, look, guys, I got something special for y'all. I'm going on this nice little tour. It's a tour about African history in Brazil. So we're gonna walk around a lot of the popular places out here in Rio de Janeiro. The whole tour is in Portuguese. I'm gonna try to get what I can get from it and try to translate for you guys. But I'm also give you guys some fun facts. So let's get into it. All right, guys. So look, the tour takes place in this neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro called Little Africa. This neighborhood is one of the top 3 most important areas when talking about the history of Black Brazilians. Now, the statue you see there is a statue of Mercedes Batista. She's the first Black classic ballerina in Brazil, and it's pretty interesting that she has this statue for a couple reasons. For example, in the US, we rarely celebrate entertainers in this way. You'll see statues of civil rights leaders, Black politicians, etc., but rarely entertainers. Let me explain why I think this choice makes a lot of sense. Like I said, Mercedes was a ballerina, but of course she faced a lot of racism and oppression, and she was really forced to perform in the background. So she never really got the chance to exhibit her true talent on the front line. Now, I think this symbolism is really important for Black Brazilians and Blacks in general because our talent and contributions were never really recognized in the way that they should have been. You have cities like Rio, where Black slaves built the city. Cities like Salvador, also in Brazil, where African slaves built the city. But they never got the true recognition of what they built. Even the US South, a lot of that, those buildings, architecture was built by Black slave labor. And to this day, people still don't recognize that places like the White House was built by slaves. So I think it's a great way to kind of symbolize that a lot of the talent wasn't recognized. And also I think, especially in this neighborhood, it was a good choice because, as we'll see later, we have like the creation of samba in this neighborhood, and also many like musicians and influencers who face that same struggle. All right, guys, before we move on, I think it's really important to stop here and say that this area was called Little Africa because at one point it had the highest concentration of Africans outside of Africa. Also, although you see it here, you know, it looks pretty nice. Back when this was a beach port area, the houses you see behind you, slaves would stay at the bottom while their masters stayed on the top floor. And it was a completely different scene. Just keep that in mind. It's going to be really important going forward. Okay, guys, so the next stop on this tour is Kaido Valongo, or Valongo Wharf. Now, there's so much history, in this area. It's hard to know where to start. But remember, I told you this area was full of water, right? Because we're still in the same neighborhood. We're still in Little Africa. We're like a 5 or 10 minute walk from the statue of Mercedes Batista. So a lot of parts of this area was full of water. And this particular spot was a port. And this port is estimated to have brought anywhere between 1 million to 1.5 million slaves to Brazil. Now remember, the US only received the estimated 400,000 to 500,000 slaves. So we're talking about this port receiving more than twice the amount of slaves the entire US received, which is crazy. But look, remember I said it's a lot of history here, so stay with me. It gets crazier. This port was only discovered in 2011. So it was covered from 1911 to 2011. It's covered for 100 years by the government of Rio, particularly the mayor, who was a big fan of Europe. And during that time, he really wanted to recreate the city, recreate different parts of the city. And he thought the history that this area contained was dark and ugly, and he wanted to conceal that history. So he just conveniently covered the area, and it was only discovered in 2011. I think what's a little more interesting is, like I said, it was covered for 100 years, so that means it was covered in 1911. And that could be pretty mind-blowing to people. Just to put it in context, in the US during 2011, we were almost in the Harlem Renaissance phase. So Blacks were already starting to form these communities and get some of the liberties they didn't have during slavery. But you got to keep in mind, slavery in Brazil only ended in 1888, decades after it ended in the US. So 1911 isn't that far removed from the ending of slavery. It's about 30 years. So I think it was a really convenient time actually for the government to try to conceal the history. With all that being said, guys, we haven't even gotten into the crazy part yet of the origin of Kaido Valongo, how this place started. So in 1808, the royal family in Portugal was so afraid, so scared of Napoleon and that he would invade Portugal, they actually fled the country and came to Brazil. They came to Rio. They got up out of there. They said, Napoleon's a madman. He's conquering a bunch of countries. If he comes in here, we not about to be here when he get here. Y'all can stay, but we gone. So that's what happened. And they brought their whole royal court, of course. They brought family, friends, everybody of importance. And it said they came with about 15,000 people. And they decided to live in Rio, and they decided to live in an area or around the area called Praça do 15, the Plaza of 15. It would be more or less in the U.S. or in English. And at the time, this was the main port of slave disembarkment. So most boats went to this port to arrive with their slaves. And when that royal family set up shop and they started moving around and, you know, families started coming, naturally these rich people from Portugal, they will have to deal with the reality of slavery. They will see a lot of naked, sick, weak, delirious, even normal Africans walking around being transported through the neighborhood from, you know, slave ships or whatnot. And these rich families weren't having it. They went to the government and they said, how are we supposed to live in this community? Every day we're seeing African slaves, we're seeing African people. We need to clean this up. And that's what the government did. And they moved the main port from that plaza to Kaido Valongo. And that's how this place started.
Fala o que é isso?
Primeiro prédio feito por mãos de obras não escravizada, mãos de obras livre.
Okay.
Foi?
All right, guys, I'm gonna go over these two things really quick. This building, from my translation I got, was the first building to be contracted by black labor, and it was actually built by an engineer named Andre Heboesau. I know I messed his name up, but I put it here. And I just want to highlight this building because this was a black engineer, extremely intelligent, and he contracted free black labor to build the building, so it's super important. Secondly, I just want to jump into these type of pictures that I see a lot. I remember seeing these pictures and thinking, like, were they painted, you know, years after slavery? Are they pure imagination, or were there people actually there during that time for whatever reason drawing slaves while they watched them? And the tour guide quickly explained that a lot of these pictures come from foreigners from Europe, painters, travelers who were in Brazil or other countries like America, well, the US, and by nature they just started drawing the scene to kind of document what was going on. So a lot of these pictures, at least for me, for a long time I wondered where the heck they came from. Were they just painted in 2022 or whatever? But they were actually painted during the time of slavery, and they were depictions of how travelers saw what was going on. One more quick thing worth mentioning, these trees are called baboa trees. Again, I probably messed up the pronunciation, but these trees are from Africa, and they're really important to the Black history in Rio de Janeiro because these trees are historically known for storytelling. So in African culture, a lot of things were spoken instead of written. So storytelling was a big part of the culture. So under these trees, the elders would sit down and tell the children about different things in life and different stories that happen. So these trees are all over this area. All right, guys. So the next area we head to is called Pedra de Sal, or Salt Rock. Now this area gained its name because, like we said, remember this area was full of water and it was a port. So slaves would have to carry the salt up these rocks from the boats to get into the town. And of course, after a while, they became a little smarter and they carved out steps to help them carry the salt up the rock. But this area really gained its popularity from being titled as the birthplace of samba. Now, this is a little controversial because samba actually came to Brazil from modern day Angola, and it arrived to a city in the north of the country called Salvador. But the title was given to this area because this was one of the most popular places to practice it in Rio. And one of the reasons why is because slaves thought this was a safe space. So to actually get to Pedro de Sal is very twisty and turny. And by the time slave masters were able to get to this area, the slaves were already able to get back to work or pretend like they weren't practicing it. So it became a very comfortable place for slaves to practice. And I think that's why they gave it that name. Also, I think when you think about any popular dance or music, it's not the dance or music itself, it's all the factors that surround it that brought it to that level. So when you think of things like the Harlem Shake, anybody could do the shake in the street, but it's that energy, right? People crowded around, it's the movement behind it, seeing the videos, and it just becoming a super important thing in the culture that really pushed it to be the Harlem Shake. Anybody could do the electric slide, but it was that energy, that family, that celebration that made it what it was. So I think people give it the title of the birthplace of samba because of that energy and the circumstances, and being able to freely practice this this dance and music together. And it all really blends into that statue of Mercedes Batista because it really commemorates the idea of how important music and art is in this neighborhood. Now, before I can leave this neighborhood, I definitely got to mention how important Little Africa in Rio was for runaway slaves. It was a big runaway slave destination. These runaway slaves were called Colombos, and most of the time they'll take to the mountain. For example, right here is this hill right outside of Little Africa, which is said to be the first favela actually. But that's interesting because when I actually went to the favela, they gave me a different history. So I think it's kind of like the origin of favelas. It varies differently depending on who you ask. But if you want to see that, you can check out this video right here. But in any case, this mural, you'll see a lot of this man called Zumbi, and he was the leader of the longest standing Colombo that they have out here. And I think it's called the I'll leave the name below because I really don't want to butcher it. But you'll see this mural throughout Rio and throughout the country actually. So just very important to know that. All right, so the last site we visited on the tour was this church. Now, churches, like most buildings in Rio, were built by slaves, and religion was used as a tool to control slaves. So it was common practice for slave owners to force Africans to abandon their religious beliefs and convert them to become Catholic. Now, this was difficult, but interestingly enough, there was one saint that helped with this conversion, and that's Saint Benedict. Saint Benedict was an Ethiopian slave born to slaves that lived in Italy, and long story short, he gained his freedom and dedicated his life to helping those in need. After his death, he qualified to be a saint, which is a big, complicated process in the Catholic Church, but this really helped convert the new African slaves to become Catholic because they were able to see a saint and somebody that looked like them. Now, today, over 60% of Brazilians identify as Catholic, but one cool thing about Black history or Black slave history is that a lot of slaves were able to maintain certain customs and traditions, unlike slaves from the US. So there's a small population who still practices their religion from back home, which is Colombe. Hopefully I said that right. And to this day, they're still practicing that, mostly out in the city, Salvador. All right, guys, to end this tour, we went to this museum, which is actually operated by the same group that gave this tour. Like I said before, guys, I had to get this tour. That's why I came out here the first day I landed. I had to make it because last year I was trying to get to this and I did not make it. It was free. This tour usually runs anywhere between $30 to $60, depending if you do a group tour, personal tour, what time of year. All that stuff factors in about how the price will work. But I had to make this tour, and this group is actually the one that does it. So I'll put all the information below so you guys can check it out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe. You guys know I'll check in, do it on YouTube. Not a YouTube, but stick around, check out this museum, see the art, see the facts about it. And thanks for watching.
Não era esse campo santo. Aqui estava mais para um depósito da mercadoria. Um depósito da mercadoria que deu ruim. E quem é a mercadoria? Onde vieram? A maioria veio onde está ali, ó. Veio no Império de Gana. Essa região da costa ocidental e da África, Angola, né, os nagôs.
What's up, guys? If you like the shirt you see me wearing in this video or any of my other videos, check out the description box below to get yours.